Okay, well, I want to just welcome anybody who may be joining us through our website or Facebook page or YouTube channel for this lesson today. And we begin by just noting that Albert Schweitzer, he was often described as a polymath, a word that I hadn't been familiar with until I saw it a couple of days ago and found that its origin is traced back to the early 1600s. Translated, it means having learned much. It refers to an individual whose knowledge spans a significant number of studies, someone who is known to draw upon complex bodies of knowledge in order to solve a specific problem or issue. Now, he certainly earned the descriptive of that word because he was a theologian, he was a musician and a music scholar. He was a humanitarian, a philosopher, a writer, and a physician. And I recently came upon a passage of his writing that I'd like to offer to you today. It said, "What happens is that we realize that we are but a speck of dust, a plaything of events outside our reach. Nevertheless, we may at the same time discover that we have a certain liberty for as long as we live. There is within each of us a modulation, an inner exaltation, which lifts us above the dependence upon the gifts of events for our joy. Hence, our dependence upon events is not absolute. It is qualified by our spiritual freedom. Therefore, when we speak of resignation, it is not sadness to which we refer, but the triumph of our will to live over whatever happens to us, and to become ourselves, to be spiritually alive. We must have passed beyond this point of resignation." It is this spiritual aliveness, it is this passage beyond whatever points of resignation may exist for us today that we're going to spend some time with this morning. So if we consider passing beyond something, one thing we might envision is ourselves on some kind of journey. One that takes us away from where we have been, takes us to places that are often new, places that we're seeing for the very first time. An article I was reading a while back that spoke to taking this kind of a journey alone, without anybody else along with us, referred to it as a passage of the heart, mind, and soul. The article was on the website upliftconnect.com, and I borrowed its title for my title of the lesson for today, Travel Well and Journey Home. And it told the story, the author of it told his story about a 2-month solo trip that he had taken outside of the United States, and of the nerves and the anxiety and the stress that he was feeling about embarking upon such a journey. And he called it his outer journey. And on his initial flight, it was a 14-hour flight, he sat next to a young woman who was on her way home from having been abroad for the last year. And the anxiety that she was feeling was about now going back home, what the author referred to as her inner journey. She told him that her anxiety was pretty much based in the fact that she was no longer the same person she was a year ago. And so he began to wonder and worry a little bit if he too would be different when the time came for him to return to his home. Now, there's research that's been done about traveling alone that shows that the anxiety expressed in the article is almost something that you can expect to happen. It's not unusual at all. And some of the reasons that they found this to be so is that first of all, traveling to new places alone especially if it's a foreign location from where you live. It can bring up feelings of vulnerability. And vulnerability can be one of the most uncomfortable feelings that we have. It also showed that when we are in unfamiliar places, something that we're almost required to do if we're going to enjoy ourselves while there is to come out of our shells a little bit more, to stretch a bit or maybe a lot, beyond our usual and known comfort zones. Again, something that's not always easy for everyone to do. And then the studies have shown that journeys such as these solo journeys into new places, can alter our minds, our perspectives, our invisible prejudices, our hearts, and they can also alter our ability to empathize and connect to what we once perceived as quote unquote other. Now, how many folks, if knowing all of this up front, do you think maybe would consider making a change in plans? So yes, creating this physical distance from what we might refer to as our ordinary life, it can be a bit unsettling. But the research shows that there are also benefits to this kind of trip. And one is that when we look back at our ordinary lives from a distance, we're able to more clearly see all that we already have in our lives, and that can create a significant increase of gratitude in us for our life back home. And secondly, which I thought was a really powerful statement in this article, it said that this kind of solo journey gives us the opportunity to redefine and establish what home means to our sense of belonging and to our identity. To redefine, to reestablish our quote unquote home in terms of having it reflect our true sense of belonging, our true identity, or as Mr. Schweitzer offered, it offers us the opportunity to become ourselves and to be spiritually alive. I found myself noticing such a correlation between the article and so much of what we are experiencing today, especially as it applies to racism and to the unlawful police force, being applied to the African American community. And I know that many states, ours included, were moving more into reopening the economy and businesses and so forth. But I still think that for the most part, we're still relatively confined, to our homes. We are being either encouraged or just told to not travel to new and exciting places that many of us might be doing this time of year. And yet, as we sit in our homes, as we have been sitting in our homes, just these structures that provide us shelter, I think that we have been invited over and over and over again, every single day of late, to journey to what may be new places for us. And these invitations are only for us, not for anybody else to come along with us. And I believe that these invitations are creating some discomfort in many of us. That we and so many others throughout this country, we're having some anxiety arise. We are having some vulnerability wanting to make itself known. Because as we begin to think about setting out on these journeys, perhaps we're becoming aware of the very real possibility that we're going to come face to face with things that are going to ask us to alter our minds, to alter our perspectives, to alter our invisible prejudices, to alter our hearts, and to alter our abilities to empathize and connect to what we once perceived as other. Perhaps we'll find ourselves having to go deeper within ourselves to redefine who we are, to identify what we truly want to be, who we truly want to be, and to be seen as by others as we speak our words or express our actions. So I would suggest that the best way to venture forth on these journeys is to go home first. Go home first, and not to the structure, but to the home within us. That place where our spirituality is always alive, whether we're aware of it or not. That place where we can be reminded time and time again of who we truly are. The place where we can uncover and bring forth the strength and the courage, the humility, the resolve, the whatever it is that we need to step into the discomfort, to expose the vulnerability, to feel the anxiety, and to move beyond any points of resignation that might be in our lives today, trying to keep us from taking these journeys that we know deep down are ours to take. When we go home in this way, we find support from that part of us that I noted as always being spiritually alive. And the first of these is the ability to move past close-up thinking. Any close-up thinking that we may be doing. You think about that saying of, not being able to see the forest for the trees. Sometimes when we look too closely at something, our vision is narrow and we become narrow-minded. The things that we can see up close, they start turning into obstructions to a bigger picture, a broader picture. They obstruct our imaginations. And we lose the ability to see the obstacle and the potential to get past it, to see these things more clearly and more objectively. Clarity and objectivity are two things that can really help us to form new thoughts and new ideas and new ways to see ourselves, to see others, to see our world, and to do it all in ways that unite us, not separate us. One way I was thinking of how this particular thing is showing up today is in the issue of those who have chosen over the last, I guess it became really present in our view about over the last 4 years, and those folks who had chosen and still choose to kneel during the national anthem. I've been listening to some commentary recently by some who initially took great offense to that, seeing it as being an affront to the country and to our servicemen and servicewomen. Today, seeing brought to much greater light the extent to which racism and police force, unjust police force against people of color exists. They said that now they can see and they can better understand that the intent of the kneeling really was to protest peacefully against that kind of behavior and not to be an act of disrespect against the country or our military personnel. Appreciation is another gift of going home within. An appreciation that comes as we admit that even if we don't know what it is, we know that there's a lot that we don't know. That there are so many different ways of seeing and viewing the world around us. And I think folks can sometimes confuse the idea of appreciation with agreement, or having to accept someone or something as their own. But that's not what it is. We can appreciate someone or we can appreciate something without agreeing with the person, without adopting whatever that something is for ourselves. And something that immediately comes to my mind when I think about this is the appreciation that I've come to have for this town and the surrounding area since I moved here, back in 2013. And it's appreciation that I came to have as I learned, as I listened, as I learned more about small town culture. I had never lived in a small town such as this before. Appreciation I came to learn about and to have, regarding the pride and the immense energy and ownership that exists in the concept here of buying local. It's appreciation that I've come to have for the ways in which the natural settings that surround us call to the hearts of so many people, so many of you and so many others. Appreciation for the multitude of outdoor activities or sports, physical activities, and so forth that are pretty much participated in all year round. Now, with all that appreciation being said, I'm not ashamed to say that my idea of camping involves packing a bag and then staying at a nice hotel with running water and room service. And I've shared some physical challenges with you over the years. And because of that, I'm not able to participate in most of the various outdoor activities that exist around me. But that doesn't mean that I can't or that I don't appreciate how much enjoyment they bring to all of you and so many others in this town. It doesn't mean that I don't appreciate how much they feed your souls and how some, they're even, they're parts of your spiritual practices. You move through them as spiritual experiences. See, appreciation comes as we become aware of differences and don't see them as being threatening to us in some way or wrong in any way. Differences that exist in cultures or customs can be so enriching if we let them. See, appreciation nurtures respect of the cultures and the customs. And respect nurtures our own behavior while in their midst and how we relate them to others when we're out of their midst. So appreciation might just be one of those things that we want to use to redefine who we are, to figure out our sense of belonging and who we want to be in the home, whether that home is just within our own hearts, whether it's the home that is our circle of family and friends or strangers we meet, whether it's the home that is our town or the home that is our country. One last gift to share that comes from going to our spiritual home first before we embark upon these journeys beyond whatever points of resignation may be before us today, comes that when we realize that moving through the challenging times, moving through the discomfort and the uncomfortable feelings can make a lasting and a very important impact on us. The author of the article reflected on this a bit as he shared some of what he had discovered as he began his journey back home. He noted that he did indeed feel like a completely different person, as his initial flight companion had shared. But he went on to say that he still knew, though, at his core, he said his true essence was exactly the same as it had been before. And I wholeheartedly support that statement. What was different and what had changed, he said, was his ability, in his words, to shine through. To shine through, shine that essence forth as to who he truly was. What was different was his ability to bring that essence forth without all of the confinements he had felt when that journey first began, without the fear, without the stress and the anxiety and the worry. He said that along the way of his 2-month solo journey, he had dropped a lot of baggage. His mind had expanded. His vision now saw a road that was vast, not narrow, and seemed limitless in nature. He was no longer scared. He said he was excited about continuing to explore himself and in turn explore what he referred to as the incredible world we all share. To be spiritually alive We must have passed beyond this point of resignation. Over the last several months, I'd say just dated from the beginning of the year, I've been experiencing a bit of an internal tug of war between my spiritual awareness and aliveness and points of resignation. Between knowing at a spiritual level who I am and how I do belong, and knowing that I have a lot to learn, that I have a lot to do in order to establish and express that more broadly in my home. And in the context of my conversation this morning, that home being my country. As it pertains to the racism that is front and center in ways that we've not seen in a long time, my discomfort, my anxiety, my vulnerability, my points of resignation consist of things like knowing that there's a lot I don't know, along with a feeling of seeming certainty at this point in time that learning is going to be very difficult and uncomfortable. It consists of knowing how many times I've not been aware of how I have spoken or acted in ways that just put on for full display my white privilege. Doesn't matter whether it is intentional or not. And knowing that there have been plenty of times that I have been complicit by not speaking out when presented with prejudicial, racist, and bigoted actions or commentary. And I believe that as I've been trying to step into these tug-of-war sessions from a place of my spiritual beliefs and my spiritual self, that the universe felt I was ready for a nudge. And that nudge forward came in the form of an invitation that I received this past Thursday afternoon as I was watching and listening to the memorial service in Minneapolis for George Floyd. And that invitation came with something that I was supposed to listen to before even paying attention to the invitation itself. Listen to words that were being spoken by Reverend Al Sharpton. He said, as you go through these long 8 minutes, think of what George was going through, laying there, begging for his life, narrating his own death. We can't let this go. We can't keep living like this. If you didn't see it, Reverend Al was inviting everyone in the chapel to stand up, to stand quietly, and to stand still for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. That length of time that the police officer had knelt on George Floyd's neck. To do this in honor of Mr. Floyd. And so I rose and I stood in my living room, watching everyone in that chapel standing, the emotional waves moving through them, seeing images shown on split screen at the same time of thousands of people in New York City, Minneapolis, and Washington, D.C., all of them at a complete and silent standstill. And then I felt the invitation speaking to me for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I shed tears for most of those 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I had feelings I'm still trying to define and understand. But there are 2 things of which I am very clear. First is that I have been one who have let things like this go in the past. And if I do it again, I will perpetuate a way of life that goes against everything that I believe my true essence to represent. And secondly, I know that I'm still here. I'm still here. And because of that gift, I have the sacred opportunity to narrate my life. I felt that it was very important for me to take a step or two before the sun set on Thursday evening. And so I took some time. I did some research, and I contributed financially to a couple of recommended organizations that work in support of criminal justice for people of color. And then I shopped local. Brilliant Books, 2 days earlier. I'm on their email list. They had sent an email out on Tuesday with a slew of suggested reading for anybody wishing to learn more about the history of racism, how to not to learn how not to be a racist, but to learn how to be anti-racist. There's a difference. And those seemed like good places for me to start. So I ordered the books, just waiting to get them. I'm urging each of you today, every single one of you, to take some time in your inner home to determine where you are, where you might like to go, and what steps are the right ones for you to take as we deal with racism in this country. And there are so many resources being made available every single day, every hour. If anybody wants the email that I received from Brilliant Books, put your email in the chat and I'll be happy to forward it on to you later this afternoon. The Obama Foundation sent out an email after President Obama's recent town hall discussion earlier this past week. It too included link after link after link to organizations who have offerings of resources, ways to get involved, way to participate in bringing about change. You know, there is a local Black Lives Matter page on Facebook, a local group here with information and resources, along with updates about the peaceful protests that are being held in our town, just like the one we were discussing a little bit together earlier that took place yesterday. Unity Worldwide Ministries, this Thursday, 2 o'clock Eastern Time, they're putting on a webinar, and it's titled Embracing Our Common Humanity, Supporting Healing and Justice. They're also beginning to schedule what we referenced in announcements last Sunday, the presentations that had been planned for the now canceled in-person Unity's Peoples Convention that now they're just going to put online, free and available to anybody. And they include topics such as spiritual activism in a politically charged world. And another one is increasing racial diversity. We'll have those links in our e-news, or just go to unity.org yourself. Hit the unity.org/ministry services. Everything is there for you to see what they have to offer. And if nothing else, if you haven't already, listen and watch Reverend Sharpton's eulogy. Have your own sacred experience of 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Because I truly believe that we have reached a place, we have reached a time where we can no longer let this go. We can no longer let this go. And we can no longer keep living like this. My blessings to each of you, and God bless you.